News and Talk, WAOK Black History Series.
Blackness, keep on.
Conversations with Derrick Boazman, profile civil rights pioneer and one of the closest confidants to both Coretta Scott King and Dr. Martin Luther King. This is Xernona Clayton. In this riveting interview, Ms. Clayton walks us through her early days of growing up in segregated Oklahoma and her activism as a young lady. She tells why she came to Atlanta and how she ended up traveling around the country with Ms. King. Listen closely as Xernona Clayton gives her firsthand account of driving Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to the airport for the final time on his way to Memphis, Tennessee. Her final conversation with Dr. King and the promise he made that he never got to keep. Now, Conversations with Derrick Boazman, featuring history maker Xernona Clayton on News and Talk 1380 WAOK.
All right, this is Derrick Boazman, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of talking to Xernona Clayton. Mrs. Clayton, how are you?
I'm wonderful, but seeing you makes it a double wonderful. Always a pleasure.
Look, I was expecting somebody to open the door other than you, but when we walked in, you threw the door open and you reminded us that you drove over here this morning in the driving rain,
Yes.
and you do that every time. Tell us about, but you're 90, do you tell people how old you are?
Oh, you had to start there, huh?
Okay, yeah.
Well, I ducked it for a long time.
Okay.
I used to have a funny story that circulated, like I was, 31. 31. Every year it's 31. And they said, where'd you get that 31? I said, because when people ask you how old you are, I just said, age is just a number.
Yeah,
So I just picked one. 31 was it.
certainly.
And it got so many laughs that I wouldn't turn it away. But finally, when I knew, of course, I always knew what my real age was, but it, got a lot of laughter about my being 31. But now at 89, I figured, gee, that next number is 90. Mm-hmm. 90 just seems so old. I remember when I was going to church years ago, all the old women sat in the front rows, and they were old, and they were like in their 70s and 80s. Here I'm talking about 90? Oh, no. And I just said, the reality is here. I knew it all the time, but could always get a good laugh. But what I decided to do is record 90 years of something. What did I do?
Yes.
In these 90 years. And I remember my father said, when you're in doubt about whether you're doing the right things, now go to the book, talking about the Bible. He said, it's just plain and simple. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked. And he went on down the simple texture. And then it started to seem so easy. Just feed the hungry. And so, I go broke all the time because I will feed people when they are in need. People need clothes for children. It's easy for me. So I went through that at 90. I'd learned the lesson that you can do unto others, as my father taught me to look at that picture.
Yes.
And my literary agent now says that she's recommending that I put that down in book form because getting to be 90 is old. I'm still healthy, and I can hop, skip, and jump at 90. So it's not bad.
Yeah.
So I now have moved from 31 to 90,
right.
Making the real number.
And you're beautiful,
Thank you.
always. It's a beautiful person. Let's talk about, it's a long ways from Muskogee, Oklahoma, to Atlanta, to working with Dr. King. But you had in those 90 years, you've had some great stops. Tell us about your early upbringing in Muskogee. What was that like to be out in Oklahoma?
Being born in a small town where there were more white people than black, we couldn't drink out of the water fountain downtown. My mother tried her best to give us an opportunity that would not include that water fountain. And she would take a bottle of water or some water with her when we go shopping. And would give us water from her little basket to keep us from drinking out of the fountain. But we thought that they never told us why. They just, no, you don't want to drink that water. We thought that she had that was Kool-Aid in that fountain, and she just didn't want us ruining our meal. We didn't know. They tried to shield us from the reality of racism because my mother was part Indian, and my father was the one, I don't know what they called him back in those days, but he kept the records of the Native Americans. And so we saw Indians coming in our house, in and out all the time, because on certain days, which was like payday, they came to our house to get their checks from my husband. From my father. So racism was real. We went to the black school, and right across the street was the white school. But we had such an exciting years at our school that we didn't care. We were not faced with having to analyze racism, and I'm glad of that in one sense, that it kept our minds on trying to improve our minds, learning how to read, write, and do all the things that are important. And they just didn't want us to face that ugly thing called racism. And so we escaped it for the most part. Now, we knew that was not our school,
right,
but we loved going to our school, which was across town. But we'd walk, other kids would walk, we'd laugh and talk all the way to school, so we didn't have no bad days. But, you do learn that there's a difference, like you're celebrating Black history at your school, and the other schools don't have anything to do with that. But you can live without it. And they never said it. We just lived it. We lived a happy life. I was reared as a happy child. There was laughter in our home. My mother and father were always there. And our friends would come to our house rather than go to their houses, because that's where the fun was. My mother would crack pecans and then make some biscuits, and we'd have fun. And our friends did not have that kind of life at home, so they ended up coming to our house. So we had a happy home life. So I grew up happy. Then got ready to go to school, got a scholarship to Tennessee State University, and did the same thing over again. Racism, but we didn't know it. I didn't know that our school was racist until I left, because we had a godfather who was also a minister who shielded us from the racism of Nashville, so we didn't even know it. He called his friend, 2 or 3 of them who owned stores downtown, and told them we're going to be shopping, and he didn't want any problems. He had enough money he could afford to do it, so we got shielded. Then I got a scholarship to the University of Chicago. And so then my sister and I said we because I was a twin. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that.
I was a twin. So we did everything together. So when we graduated from college, we went right to Chicago, so I'd be ready for grad school in the fall, University of Chicago. And while there, I got a chance to be physically close to a store that I grew up admiring and wanting to be. Marshall Fields was just the best store in the country to me.
Right.
Expensive by any standard, I suppose. But now I'm living in the city where Marshall Fields is. So I'm going to go to Marshall Fields. I'm going to make some money so I can go to Marshall Fields regularly. But Marshall Fields was kind of tricky. They supported Black events, like they'd give money to the Urban League and the NAACP, but they didn't hire one single person. And I just said, oh, that's a blight on the reputation of my store. I got to change that. So what I did is I decided that I was going to see if that's true. I just figured that couldn't be true, not for Marshall Field, not to hire Black people. And so I saw an ad, and this was, I joined the Urban League. I was an Urban Leaguer for a long, long time. but I joined the Urban League to help fight racism. Because, what I forgot to tell you is the racism part was one night in college, my sister and I went out with our boyfriends and to an event, and then on the way home back to the dormitory, we said, oh, more hamburger. Wow. And so we all had money.
Right.
And I tell you that because I used to think, like, if you don't have no money, get out of here. We had money, nice car, and went in to get hamburgers. The man, I guess he owned the store, had a knife this big.
Wow.
And he held it up and he said, if you niggers don't get out of here, you know you don't belong here. I'm going to cut your heads off. And he looked like he meant it, scared us to death. And that pain is still with me today. But the part that really stuck with me is you don't belong here. Because I kind of heard that along my path. You know, you don't belong here. You niggers ought to move somewhere else because you don't belong here. So I still had that thorn in my side. You don't belong here. So I couldn't believe that Marshall Field would practice with that kind of attitude. So I said, I'm going to help him out to find out if it's true. So I watched the one ads to see when something is open that I could apply for.
Right.
Now, I was an excellent typist. I learned that in college. And I could spell, and I was a pretty good beginning student. So typing was not a challenge for me. So I always knew that if you're going to make a case, don't be far away from the subject. So in 10 minutes, I could get there. So this particular morning now, my plan is going into action. And sure enough, there in the paper was a clerk typist ad. Oh, that's
you
for
said,
me.
this is my opportunity, my chance.
Now I'm going down there, and I'm going to get them out of that hole, and they can be good again. Got in there, and the lady was very friendly and said, oh, I'm so sorry, but we just filled it. Just filled it. I just got the paper, you know. And didn't argue the point, and I said, oh, sorry, walked out. But you don't give up on the one time. You try that 2 or 3 times. So sure enough, the next day, same ad, same rejection. So I knew then that they weren't going to do right. So I decided I better take them on as a challenge. Like, they need to open these doors widely and treat everybody the same. Now, they treated black people with friendliness. I mean, they welcomed you in. Well, you know, anybody's got money can go to Marshall Field because everything in there was expensive.
Right.
But once I knew then that they weren't for real, I had to go after them. Yeah. And it worked. We had a protest. But then I didn't just win Marshall Field. We won Spiegel, Montgomery Ward, all the stores that black people are going to go to first. We got them wide open. And I tell you something about a victory. It spurs you on. Yeah. The next one's always easier.
Right. You become a pioneer, opening Marshall Fields, kind of desegregating the stores so that people could go. But then you went into broadcasting. You were one of the earliest people, black people, to be on TV. Tell us about how did you break into
I was the first. I made a speech. I was tricked into making a speech for Mr. Ralph McGill, who was the publisher of the Atlanta Constitution. And I had met Mr. McGill when I moved to Atlanta. Now, we skipped over the fact that I've been meeting Dr. King, seeing him, because he was this young man. Everybody said, have you heard this young guy? He can preach. Oh, he got a reputation fast from college. And they said, he's going places. And he wasn't, you know. What you later saw was what was earlier. He was really quite a spokesperson. And had energy and said he's going to change the South and he's going to change the country, change the world. And everybody was talking about him. And so I met him
Where'd you first meet him? What was the
at
incidents
a
of
Baptist
the first
convention.
meeting?
Okay. He was there, so it's everybody. Every Baptist goes to conventions when they can. But he was on program also, so I got a chance to hear him speak, and so I knew a little bit about him before meeting him. And I was saying, everybody's right. The people who are talking about him are right. He's a great spokesperson. He looks like he's got energy, and from what I can read and see at that point, at a point, I had gotten married to the editor of Jet magazine. Mm-hmm. So I knew everything was going on. So they wrote about him in Jet every week. It seemed like he was making news. And so he was just a newsmaker. And to fast forward my story, because I got a whole lot of stories, you have to keep me on course. When he had now come to Atlanta, because he was started out in Montgomery. Mm-hmm. So now he'd moved to Atlanta and wanted to hit it big, so to speak, so that everybody would know what they were doing. And he said, but we need some press person. And they said, well, who do you think we can get? And everybody said, there's a guy in Chicago. He's the editor of Jet magazine, but he is a whiz. He can really write, and he can put stuff together. And Ed did have that kind of reputation. But they say he's pricey, though, and he is. Ed was pretty cocky, too. Mm-hmm. But
because he had a wife that liked to go to Marshall Fields and everything.
Exactly. Right. But he could back up what he said.
Yeah.
What he boasted about, he could do. That's what everybody said. A lot of people brag, but they can't back it up. Yeah. But Ed could. So he finally called Ed and said, we can't run away from Price. Let's see if he's really as smart as they say he is. And so he called Ed, and Ed said, well, what are you paying? He said, and he told me, no. He said, I got a wife who wears more dresses than that. Mm-hmm. She always shopping. So he said, no, he couldn't do it. So Martin talked to Ed a long time on the phone. He said, well, I'll tell you what, let us send you a ticket. And why don't you come here in person and see what we're doing? And sure enough, Ed came down here. And he called me and said, those people are serious. They have a commitment to changing this world. And he was impressed with people's hard work and their dedication to change. And he said, I think I got to go. We'll figure out how to eat. We got enough clothes and food and stuff. So he said, we got to go. But while he was here visiting with Dr. King, he met Mrs. King. And she wanted very much to do concerts because she majored in music in college. Mm-hmm. And so he said, if you wanted to go around the nation, you need to meet my wife. She's a whiz at putting things together, and she's always running somebody else's business. So you need to meet her. So she called me on the phone, and we met on the telephone. And to fast forward my story, because all my stories are long, she asked me, where could we start now? And so, not having seen her, she hadn't seen me, I hadn't met her, didn't know what she's like. I agreed to map out a route for her. Like, it was a natural thing. All the churches, every minister knew Martin Luther King. So I said, we'll pick the churches. You tell me what churches he has a good relationship with. Let's go there. So we went to Los Angeles. We were on the road 10 nights.
Wow.
Doing concerts, and they were all successful. And so now they really put the squeeze on us because now she wanted me, and he wanted Ed. So they put it on us. And I tell people now, Dr. King didn't always tell the truth because he promised me, if you'll just move, I'll see that you'll have a housekeeper, a new car, a new house. And I said, you know what? Although he's a preacher, he doesn't always tell the truth because I never got the dog or nothing.
Right. So you relocate to Atlanta. And
so we come to Atlanta because of them.
Yeah. And so eventually you start working with Dr. King. You began to...
First day. I mean, he offered me a job over the phone so that he could, hire me and Ed. So we both at least, there were small checks, but at least there were two checks coming in, you know.
You've developed a extraordinarily close relationship with Coretta Scott King.
Oh, yeah.
You all were very close. I've heard you talk about that relationship. You were kind of her soul sister. You were there for it all. Tell us about the Coretta Scott King that people didn't know, because we saw her her persona in public, the mother, the wife of Dr. King, but behind closed doors, you tell the story of her exhaustion, and it was a lot of work, it was a lot of worry, but she bared that cross with a lot of dignity. But I remember you telling me on the radio one time, she was so tired, and you just put her foot in your
you remember
in your
that?
lap.
Well,
tell us about that story.
Okay. At the end, let me do the end and fall back into it. She, at the end of our 10 days on a trip, she said, you know what, I'm beginning to feel that we have what was known as a real friendship. Because for 10 days and nights, we've slept together, eat together, run around together, and worked together, and never fell out. We never had a crossword between each other. And she had some kind of problem with her feet and legs. They would swell and it'd be so painful. And I would just, get on the sofa, put her legs up in my lap, get some alcohol, rub her legs, and she'd feel so much better. And then she said to me, you're not the maid. I said, I didn't see myself as a maid. I saw myself as your friend who's in pain, hoping I can relieve your discomfort, And that was the beginning of our friendship that lasted until she passed away.
You become a confidant to Dr. King. I remember you telling the story of driving him the night before Memphis, that I believe you drove him to the airport, and the children didn't want him to go. That was this kind of ominous feeling around the trip to Memphis, the second trip to Memphis, before the assassination. Talk about the mood of being around Dr. King at that time. Get us to 1968. That was a heaviness. Dr. King had come out against the Vietnam War. He had been put on the list as the most dangerous man in America by J. Edgar Hoover. That was a sudden heaviness about his life, but you were there for it. And talk about the mood going into Memphis.
You should be sitting here. You know all the story. You remember everything you read, I suppose. I was asked, this was a Sunday, when Mrs. King at this point had some problems and had been in bed for a week. And she didn't want, although they had a driver, he was off. And so she said, Martin wants you to drive him to the airport tomorrow. And I said, well, I'll be delighted. But after dinner, so they invited me for dinner, which often was the case. I often had dinner with them, with the children and all that. I was, like the unofficial aunt to the kids. But after dinner, we retired to the family room, and he said, I bet you don't know that I'm a good singer. And he always loved it. He loved laughter.
Yes.
He said, I bet you didn't know I could sing. I said, well, I heard you could, but I haven't really heard you sing. So I don't know for certain. He said, well, okay, get on the piano then. Give me a B flat. So I gave him a chord, B flat. He started singing. I said, oh, you are pretty good, So what I'm really trying to say to you, that afternoon was probably the most enjoyable day that any of us had had. Mama King, that's his mother, was there.
Yeah, she came
His
over to
wife
visit.
was there. His friend was there. And now he's performing. The Martin Luther King that the world knows, is clowning and having a good time because that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
And so now bedtime comes and we'd stay so long. I said, oh, I got to go so I can get up tomorrow morning. Well, he's always going to the airport. The kids had never objected. But this morning was different. Monday morning, I got up and drove over to the house. And these kids were there squabbling with him. Daddy, don't go. He said, what do you mean? He said, Daddy, don't leave us. And they grabbed his attaché case. And he had to snatch it out of their hands to retrieve it. And they said, Daddy, don't go. Then one would run in front and block the door. Then he'd find an opening, and then the other kid now runs down the steps to block the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one got in front of him, blocked the door. I mean, they acted like they'd never seen him leave before, and they do it all the time. He's always going to the airport, going somewhere. And Dr. King really was disturbed because they'd never acted like that before. He didn't know. He finally just said, I'm going to have to come right back from Memphis, which is what he'd planned to do anyway. And I think these kids are telling me I need to spend more time with them.
Yes.
And that's exactly what I want to do. Is I want you to help me with my schedule because I'm changing this. I'm going to spend more time with them because you never saw them again.
Right.
And so that was a very poignant period in everybody's life.
Yeah. Let's jump back a little bit. Tell us about Dr. King, the man. What we have come to discover that he was a jokester. Talking to Andy Young and others who were with him a lot, pillow fights at the hotel. This serious guy that we all came to know really had to have some level of levity to his life, probably to make it a little bit less complicated and threatening. But what did he like to do? Tell us who the man really was.
What he liked to do was what you're describing now. He would love nothing better than to have his close friends, because he wouldn't clown in front of strangers.
Right.
But having the close family around, eating some chicken and telling some story. And what was so wonderful about his storytelling, he had the inflection. Like, he's very smart, so he could speak French. And he said, this Frenchman said, and then he'd speak French, and then we'd fall out laughing, and then the Italian said this. And I mean, he could just go down the list. And he enjoyed it as much as we did. So the whole room of his close friends was filled with just what we always said, falling out laughing. But he loved it best. Having fun with his friends was the best moments in his life.
We see, I kind of picture him, I believe, in Savannah shooting pool. He has a cue stick behind his back because we, and society has made a great effort to almost iconize Dr. King, as well they should. But you were there for this is just the everyday guy. This is the husband, the father, the dreamer, right? What did he enjoy eating? What was his diet? What did he like to do? Tell us some of the stuff that nobody else, unless they know Xernona Clayton, may get now.
He loved fattening stuff, like fried chicken,
fried chicken,
barbecue.
Right. Well, we know he spent a lot of days in Pascal.
Yeah.
So, right.
Yes. So down home cooking, beans, and I mean, he liked all the fattening stuff. And guess what he would do when someone would say, "Listen, you get a little thick there in the midsection." He'd put everybody on a diet in the house. So he punished him. I said, Martin, that's not fair. You're doing all the eating, and you're making him, pay for it. But he was such a joyful individual, loved people. He just despised the fact that we live in a country who didn't want us. And he was determined to do something about it, just determined. And that's why he worked so hard to try to change the look, the tenor, the practice of America. that we weren't bad people.
Yeah.
We're just like everybody else. We just wanted an opportunity.
Right.
And I always go back, every time I'd hear him say that night when that man said that you niggas don't get out of here because you know you don't belong here.
Right.
I wore that pain for a long time. You don't belong here. As a black person, you don't belong here. And Dr. King says we all belong here, you know, and we can all live here together. We're just putting a barrier up because we don't want to, but we can live together. And he just could not understand why we couldn't. He never could understand why we couldn't.
The evening of April 4th, 1968 comes. Dr. King is standing on the balcony at the Lorraine Motel, and a bullet pierces the evening, strikes him in the side of the face, and he lays there dying. The word comes back to Atlanta, and I think it was, if I remember correctly, wasn't too much after that, you end up at the home with Coretta and the children. What do you remember about receiving that message back in Atlanta from Memphis?
I remember every moment. I was at a restaurant having lunch with the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, trying to change his views.
Wow.
And the maitre d' knew, I mean, everybody knew I'd come to Atlanta because of the Kings. And so she came and put a note on my table, like, did you hear what happened to Dr. King? Well, I just driven him to the airport, so I figured nothing happened. And so I ignored the note. She came back a second time. She said, excuse me for interrupting, but the radio is not very clear, but I think I hear that something bad has happened to Dr. King. Maybe you better check it out. I said, oh, well, thank you so much, and I will. So I got up and went to the telephone, and they had 3 private lines, and all of them were busy, and that never happened, you know, but all the phones are busy. And I figured something must have happened. And so I asked my guests to drive me over to their home. We weren't far away. And when I got there, she was backing out with the mayor, and the police were taking her to the airport because she wasn't sure yet he's killed. Right. They said they hadn't been confirmed yet. So she's thinking now that maybe she'll see him alive or something. But so she said, so please, you know, take care of the children from now. She had housekeeping staff, but, you know, she didn't want them to feel alone or by themselves, and because she's now dashing away and didn't get a chance to talk to them because they weren't home. And so she asked me to, you know, just see that things ran well with the children. But, you know, the rest of the story, she went to the airport and she turned around and came right back because they verified at the airport here in Atlanta that he indeed had died from that bullet. So now she thought she better come home and see what's next. But she took me in the back of the house, which is where her private quarters were, the bedroom, and had me just sit and talk with her. We got calls from everywhere, including the President of the United States. But I want to tell you about one call. The calls came from everywhere, but she had asked me to go to my house and use my telephone. We couldn't use her phones. All her phones were tied up. Ringing. And she said, my mother and father don't even know what's happened, you know, so can you go to your house and call them for me? I started out. They didn't last but a minute because now she's got the boys she hasn't told. So now she's got to tell the children. And she wanted me to go with her. And when I went into the bedroom, she had a death grip on my body. She was holding me so tightly, I guess, for strength to talk to them about, you know, what was going on. But she had fussed at him earlier in the day because her birthday's in April, and she loves red roses. So he always bought her red roses. But now she saw these red roses on the mantle, and what in the world, she got these red roses here? Well, when they did talk on the phone, because he called her, this is obviously before he died, she said, he said, "Did you see your roses?" She said, "Yes, and I'm mad about them." And he said, "Well, why would you give me these roses?" He said, "It was for your birthday." She said, "Well, they'd be dead by birthday time." And he said, "I didn't know whether I would be with you or not." That was the point of it.
Wow.
I didn't know whether I could say it in person. I wanted you to have your flowers on your day, and I got them early. Oh, that was poignant stuff. But as she was telling the boys, she had me around my waist with a death grip. I mean, she was holding on to me. So trying to be strong for them, I'll never forget that. Yeah. How she told them the story that he's not coming back. So, see, they were right all along from that
don't go
presentation in the living room as he was leaving, like, "Daddy, don't leave us. Don't leave us." We think, and we don't know, you never will know whether they had a premonition or not, but he didn't come back.
Yeah. Do you remember the last thing he says to you as he gets out of the car with you on that day?
Yeah, he
what
said,
did he say
"Get
to
out
you?
of the car and come run with me," because she's always late, always late. He said, "So come run to the gate." Because, see, it used to be the planes would wait for you. Dr. King is coming, so-and-so is coming. And he said, "Come on, run to the airport to the airplane with me." I said, "Oh, no, they take my car." I said, "I just got this new car. They might snatch my car." And we laughed, and that's how the last time I saw him.
We're going to wrap it up because, I know you got some times, you got some things to take care of. But let's go back to you. Not only do you come to Atlanta and you would develop an incredible relationship with Ted Turner, and you'll be the founder of the Trumpet Awards. Tell us about that a little bit, and working with Turner Broadcasting, and ending up founding this incredible awards program that you now run.
Oh, you need 3 days for me to tell you. There's so many wonderful aspects of how that all developed. I became the first black person, I don't care what nobody else told you, the first black person. I broke the barrier of television. First black person to have a program. And that was Channel 5, which is the CBS affiliate here. And then, some other things took place, but I was the first one to have a program, a regularly scheduled television program. And it was very successful. Because even white people who said they weren't going to participate would beg to be on the program because they got good reviews. They wrote about me every week about who was on, what they said, who's going to be on next week. So my career started off on a high, and helped me, have a success with it. But right away, other stations had black hires. And we even started, and I called together all the management to tell them thanks for this step, that they would be proud that they'd done it, and we're glad that they did it. They said no one had ever done stuff like that, that you've broken it. And they ended up breaking in. There's several places here that I integrated because Channel 5, that's where I was, would have a big Christmas party at a restaurant, spend big bucks. And they found out one night, the first one that turned us down said, "I understand that black lady, is she coming with you?" They said, "Oh, yes." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, we can't serve her for you." He said, "Okay, you know what? We can't come here without her." And so they finally figured they were losing big bucks. And so because of me, integration took place. Some of the places that are still here now didn't want me, didn't want them because of me.
Right.
And it turned out nothing happened but goodness and all that. So good things happened and followed my presence in the television industry, and to the point that I did well, got all kinds of support, and I had a opening, what I call my opening part at the first night of television. I had, because I'd lived in Los Angeles and I knew all those celebrities. I got flowers from, Sammy Davis, from, everybody knew.
Right.
The television station was just filled with good wishes from friends I knew in California. So everything was positive. And after a while, I just said, Barbara Walters called me,
Wow.
and I had an interview with her in New York because she said, from what I can hear, you do well with us.
Yeah.
And so while I didn't get an offer, it was close.
Yeah.
And she said that she had been watching, and it went very well. So Ted Turner said, let's see if we can get her. Well, by then my first husband had died, and I met another man, and I had gotten remarried,
Yeah.
3 or 4 years later, and I just said, no, I'm tired of working. I asked him to take care of me. I'm tired of working. You do it now, But I was really making the stride in the industry because everything was positive. All the stories were positive. All the writers were positive. And they sent me, because they had 5 stations in California, in Florida, and in Ohio, and in Michigan. And they sent me there to
Wow.
introduce me.
Wow.
Even before, Oprah was on, because they sent me to her station to meet the manager there. And so my beginning was very good, exciting, and successful.
Great.
And so Ted Turner said, well, we want to hire you. And I said, I don't want to work for a little while. He said, well, just here's an office. Sit in it and just think. And so give us ideas. So I gave them ideas, and they paid me. I'd get a check. And then the relationship developed after that. We became very, very close. And to this day, we still are.
Yeah.
And he gave me $5 million to come here because he was planning to sell the station. He didn't want me in the middle of that. He wanted me to have a happy separation. So since he's right across the street there, he gave me money to buy this place. Well, not buy it. To make the move here, so that my transition could be
easy.
smooth.
Finally, a couple years ago, a statuary of you was commissioned. You're one of only a handful of people, and I think the only black woman who has a statue in the city to commemorate the life work that you've given and the sacrifices and the trailblazing career you had. How does that make you feel to know that you're still at 90 breaking barriers?
Well, I'm the first in downtown because they have some blacks in a park around, but the first black one downtown for certain. I feel a blessing from the good Lord. I'm very spiritual. I think everything good that's happened to me is because I prayed to good Lord to thank him for every good thing that happens to me.
Yes.
I don't feel like I'm the one who's making these moves. I'm there to receive the blessing. And so I will do a good job once I'm in it, but I feel like I didn't choose it. God did.
Yeah. What does future hold for Ms. Xernona Clayton? What river is there, mountain that's left to climb for you?
Okay, well, at 90, going on 92, they said that you don't have long. Well, I don't know who knows.
There you go.
So when they tell me how much time I got, I said, well, how'd you know? I'm going to live until I die. Now, that's the song we sing in church all the time. Because I am. But I said, if I keep living, there's one thing I really want to do. Dr. King said he believes strongly that blacks and whites can live together and be okay. if he could be here to see that, it would be the greatest moment in his life. To see that, he said, because you see, we all started off the same. God created all of us the very same way. Some stork in heaven or wherever came and dropped you and me and them on somebody's porch. Mm. And then after that, we found out, they're white. And that person I just saw was black. They made the difference. God didn't.
Right.
God created each of us in his own image. And so we can go back to that if I live long enough to make it happen.
Ms. Clayton, thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you.